Love lasts. I was listening to an interview the other day with the late John Lewis. He was one of the key Christian leaders in the US civil rights movements of the 1960s. He went on then to become one of the longest serving and most widely respected US congressmen in history. You might remember the movie Selma and the crowd crossing the bridge. He was in the front row of that crowd who marched across the bridge in an act of peaceful resistance to racism. This movie and thousands of books and stories show us across the globe that human beings remember the story of love in action through the non-violence of the civil rights movement far more than we remember the wealth and the achievements of the rich and powerful people of that era. The soaring heights of humanity that were attained by those acts of love and peace and hope and faith in the face of persecution, hate and injustice still echoes across history. And this is the case time after time in any time where human beings have chosen to live out of hope and love, peace and justice rather than greed and selfishness. The interview really impacted me because John Lewis described his actions in the civil rights movement and his service in politics as simply an extension of his faith in Jesus. He saw it as himself being obedient to live out his hope and belief in Jesus Christ in the particular time in history in which his life occurred. And he saw the Spirit at work through the journey of people individually and collectively being formed to be better human beings, and shared that he witnessed himself and so many others finding themselves being shaped more and more in the image of a loving God. This journey of transformation, of being shaped to be truly good, truly whole human beings, I think is at the core of what it means to be a disciple, what it means to follow Jesus. The example of Jesus himself and what it means to be human as God designed us to be, and the example of other Christian leaders, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Martin Luther King, have shown us that actions of non-violent resistance toward anything that degrades and denies God's image in our fellow human beings, that action is actually an external outworking of our faith and hope. As James says, faith without deeds is dead. So for us, in our time, if we truly believe that all people are created in God's image, then we must have faith and hope that the good is there, the love of God is there in people. The question for us is, how can we bring them together as a family, as his beloved community, to live life the way he wants us to? John Lewis shared that for the community in his time, for the fellowship of Christian leaders in his time, it took them being faithful, honest, open, and persisting on the long journey towards change. Lewis said that over the course of his 80 years of leadership, he constantly came back to the core Christian belief and worldview that Jesus' kingdom is coming. And he shared that this belief was like a constant spring welling up in hope and faith. I remember this quote he said, "I just believe it's going to get better. It's going to be all right in the end." Just these simple words that speak of the promise of the kingdom coming and the fulfillment of the redemption, reconciliation and restoration of all creation. It sustains us in the lifelong call to faithful perseverance. So the question I had for myself and maybe posing for you today is, what's the focus of love in action in our time in history, in the communities, the nation and the world that's unfolding around us? What is the injustice and evil to stand our ground in the face of and not to be overcome by, but instead of to overcome? In the last few years and in the very day that I'm speaking to you, we're witnessing pandemics, war and conflict, hate and fear. Could it be the way in which we might be voraciously consuming the natural world as if we own it, and that's leaving millions in poverty and devastation along the way, and we're seeing a rising concern of natural disasters and their impact on ordinary people? Could it be the way that families and local communities have fractured, become distanced, dislocated, and people are isolated and lonely? Could it be the fact that so many, because of that, don't have a deep sense of home in this world and know they're loved? Could it be that there is this loss of meaning, purpose, and knowledge, that there is a deeply good reason for our existence on this planet? Whichever of those different challenges that face humanity in our time, we are part of a movement across millennia, and that movement was founded in the good news that God so loves the world, that love has triumphed over death, and that love will overcome in the end. So I'd encourage you, in your way, in your time, put love in action, because love lasts.